Well, President Trump re-designated North Korea as a state sponsor of terror. The rogue regime now joins Iran, Sudan, and Syria on the U.S. terror blacklist. The Trump administration also expected to announce new sanctions against the North. Secretary of State Tillerson says this new campaign is intended to pressure North Korea to curtail its nuclear ambitions. Listen.
I think it is very symbolic on the one hand because it just points out again what a rogue regime this is and how brutal this regime is and how little they care for the value of human life. So I think if in that in of itself, I think makes a strong statement of just the nature of this regime. And as I've said, the practical effects may be limited, but hopefully we're closing off a few loopholes with this.
Now, for more on all of this is Christopher Swift, an attorney and a national security studies professor at Georgetown University. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Julie.
So, North Korea now joins Iran, Sudan, and Syria on this state sponsor of terrorism list. You see how well it's worked for them. But the president says that it should have happened a long time ago. It should have happened years ago. It absolutely should have been. But what difference will it make in the end?
Well, in the end, it doesn't change very much legally or strategically. It's an appropriate move. This is a rogue regime that does bad things to good people for bad reasons. And I think the Secretary Tillerson was very clear about that, and the President was very clear about that. But in terms of the practical effect, look, being on the list of state sponsors of terrorism means you can't get U.S. arms exports. Well, the United States hasn't exported any arms to North Korea ever. You can't get U.S. foreign aid, development aid, or political aid. Well, that's not going to happen anytime soon. You are subject to certain financial sanctions. Well, that's generally the case for most banks and most government officials in North Korea today. And then you're not allowed to get certain types of dual-use exports, dual-use commercial products that could be modified for military purposes. You can't send that stuff to North Korea anyway. So legally speaking, practically speaking, strategically speaking, it's not much of a change. Symbolically speaking, it's important because it reminds the North Koreans that they reneged on a deal that they got into with the Bush administration back in 2008. And the United States takes it seriously when people cheat on their deals.
Yeah, and, you know, Trump's announcement opens North Korea to new U.S. sanctions as well. We have seen some of the toughest sanctions under the Trump administration, specifically also getting China involved in order to get the banks to put the close on North Korea. What else should we be seeing by adding North Korea to this list when it comes to sanctions, when it comes to legal liabilities?
So it used to be that North Korea was treated very much the same way as Iran. And then in the late days of the Bush administration, the George W. Bush administration, President Bush and Condoleezza Rice dialed that back a fair amount. So these days, you can't do business with the North Korean government. There are a lot of bad actors in North Korea, and it's that you can't do business with who are individually sanctioned. And it's also worth knowing that anybody that's owned or controlled by the government in North Korea, you can't do business with.
Yeah.
That has the effect of basically blocking out the entire country for most things, most of the time. If the Trump administration were to take things to the next level, they'd probably impose something like the territorial-based sanctions that we see on Iran, in which case there's no exception to the sanctions. You look at the country, the entire country is sanctioned, not just the government and certain individuals or institutions within it. That's the direction I'd expect the Trump administration to take. It would align the approach we use on North Korea from a sanctions perspective with the approach we've used on Iran. Right now, we're treating North Korea the same way we treat Syria, and it looks like the Trump administration is going to step that up.
Okay. And as you mentioned, you know, the move, mostly symbolic, likely isn't going to be preventing Kim Jong-un and his defiance in developing nuclear weapons. However, you know, does this set up the U.S. to position itself to take harsher measures against the rogue regime? We've talked much about how the president has met with the prime minister of Japan and met with South Korea and their leaders in order to put the pressure on North Korea. The missile defense program, for example, something that we need to amp up. Does that then give us the footprint, if you will, in order to do that so we can protect these allies?
So redesignating North Korea as a state sponsor of terror is an incremental step in the right direction in terms of the coordination of political, economic, military, and diplomatic tools. But if you look at what's really going to change North Korea at the end of the day, it's going to be economic pressure from China, military pressure from the United States, and political changes within the country itself. Everything that we're doing to make sure that our allies have theater missile defense, that we're coordinated with Japan and South Korea to the extent that we can be on responding to aggression if it happens in the future. All of those things are the normal things that we'd expect any administration to do, and I'm glad to see the Trump administration doing them. But at the moment, we're sort of in a holding pattern with North Korea. You can turn up the pressure a lot, but unless you have economic pressure from China, military pressure from the United States, and political change within that country, you're not going to see this regime's behavior change very much, at least not in the near term.
All right. Christopher Swift, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming on.